Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks.
My name is Claire Matthews. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. And if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's this: grief doesn't end when the funeral does, but the vultures show up just days later. I guess you have everything now, huh? He shouted it right in my face, standing in the middle of my dead husband's living room, our living room, like he owned the place. His face was red, lips twisted with rage, hands clenched at his sides like he was doing me a favor by not hitting the wall. 4 months, Claire. 4 damn months, and you're already selling his house. Were you even sad, or was it all a show? I swear to God, I didn't even know who this man was. Tall, sharp cheekbones, the kind of military stiffness in posture that said he'd been trained for war. But this wasn't grief. This was accusation, pure and venomous. Excuse me? I snapped. Who the hell are you, and what right do you have to speak to me like that in my home? He scoffed, actually scoffed. Your home, he sneered. This house was Greg's. Everything in here was his life, his memories, his legacy. And you're just selling it off like a garage sale? You didn't even wait 6 months. I took a sharp step forward. Greg was my husband. I was the one holding his hand when the machines flatlined. I was the one cleaning up after his chemotherapy. Where the hell were you? His jaw twitched. A long silence stretched between us, so thick it could have choked someone. I was deployed, he muttered finally. I'm his brother. And just like that, my blood ran cold. I didn't even know Greg had a brother. People think grief is quiet, that it's this slow, aching kind of sadness. No. Grief is loud. It screams in the middle of the night. It punches walls. It shows up at your door demanding explanations for things it was never around to understand. This man, Ethan, I would later learn, had never been at our wedding. Never called during Greg's surgeries. Never even texted when I posted about the funeral. And now? Now he wanted to show up and judge me for selling the house that crushed my lungs every time I walked into it. You weren't in the will, I said flatly. Greg didn't mention you. Not once. I had no idea you existed. He laughed darkly, bitter and broken. Of course he didn't. That's what you do, right? You cut people off. You isolate them until they forget who they are. He was supposed to leave this house to me. It was our childhood home. No, I said sharply, stepping closer. It was our home. I cooked his meals here. I took care of him when his skin turned gray. I slept next to him every night while cancer drained the life out of his bones. You don't get to come in here now and rewrite the story. He pointed at the "for sale" sign outside the window. Then why are you selling it, huh? If it means so much to you? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I couldn't stay here anymore. Every drawer I opened held ghosts. Every room whispered memories I wasn't ready to face. I needed to move on before the grief swallowed me whole, and selling the house wasn't betrayal. It was survival. But then he said something that stopped me cold. He didn't want to be buried in this town, you know. My breath caught. What? Ethan folded his arms. You buried him here. But he always said he wanted his ashes spread over the lake in Vermont. Our family lake house. He made me promise that the last time we spoke. I felt my stomach twist. He never told me that. Well, maybe he couldn't. Maybe you didn't let him. And there it was, the first crack. Not in my resolve, but in the narrative I thought I knew. Because suddenly, I realized, maybe I didn't know everything about my husband after all. And maybe, just maybe, selling the house was the beginning of a truth I wasn't ready to face. It's easy to look at a grieving woman and say, she moved on too fast. But nobody sees the nights she slept alone, hearing the last words he ever said echo in her ears. Nobody sees the bank account bleeding, the hospital bills piling, the loneliness choking. And nobody ever stops to ask why she's walking away. Sometimes, what looks like giving up is the only way to keep breathing. But what Ethan told me next, something he claimed Greg confessed to him before he died, that changed everything. It didn't just shake me. It made me question my entire marriage. Why didn't Greg ever tell me the truth? And why did this stranger know things about my husband that I didn't? Keep watching. Because this story, it's not about a house. It's about secrets. And the one that broke me completely. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, the same one Greg and I had picked out during our second year of marriage, and just stared at the blank TV screen. Ethan had stormed out after dropping his so-called truth bomb. And I sat there like a woman who just realized she'd built her world on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. Greg wanted his ashes spread over a lake I'd never heard of. He had a family cabin I didn't even know existed. And most terrifying of all, he had a brother. I should have been angry. I was angry. But more than that, I was confused. Hurt. Betrayed. Wasn't I the one who stayed through the worst? Who washed his bloody clothes after chemo, held his head through the nausea, bathed him when he couldn't even lift his arms? Why would he keep something like that from me? I needed answers. But the only man who had them was 6 feet underground, or so I thought. The next morning, I met with the buyer. His name was Daniel. Early 40s, tan skin, blue button-up shirt tucked neatly into dark jeans. The kind of man who looked like he could be anything, a real estate agent, a contractor, maybe even a lawyer. But he wasn't smiling. In fact, the moment he walked through the front door, he stopped cold. His eyes swept across the room like he'd stepped into a memory he didn't know still existed. I didn't think it would still smell like him, he whispered. That gave me pause. I'm sorry. He turned, cleared his throat, and smiled awkwardly. Nothing. Just, this house has a certain presence. You feel it the second you walk in. I studied him. Did you know my husband? Daniel blinked. Then he laughed, but it was short and dry. No. No, not directly. But I've heard a lot about him. You could say I've been watching this house for a long time. My heart thudded. Watching it? I grew up 2 blocks over, he said, motioning vaguely toward the street. Used to ride my bike past here all the time as a kid. Never knew the man, but always wondered who lived here. Guess I finally get to find out. He stepped farther into the living room, his eyes landing on the fireplace mantel where Greg's favorite photo still sat, the one of us on the coast in Maine, arms wrapped around each other, the wind in our hair. Handsome guy, he said softly. I nodded. He was. I'm sorry for your loss. I murmured a quiet, thank you, but something about Daniel was off. Too comfortable. Too familiar. Like he did know Greg. Or at least, knew something he wasn't saying. He walked over to the mantel, fingers brushing the edge like it was sacred. Then he looked back at me. You're not just selling the house. You're selling history. I stiffened. History I shared with my husband. Alone. Daniel held my gaze. And then he said it. Are you sure about that? My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He turned slowly, one hand in his pocket. Look, I probably shouldn't be the one to say anything. I only found out after I made the offer. But, people talk, you know. Especially in a neighborhood like this. I stepped forward. Say it. He paused. Then sighed. There was a woman. A woman who used to come by when you were at work. At least, that's what the neighbor told me. Said she drove a silver Lexus. Never stayed more than an hour, but it was frequent. And discreet. My throat went dry. No. That's not possible. Daniel raised his hands. Hey, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just relaying what I heard. I figured if I was moving into this house, should know what kind of energy I'm stepping into. I shook my head. Greg could barely walk in his last 6 months. There's no way he was entertaining another woman. Daniel shrugged. I'm just telling you what I was told. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a nurse. But the neighbor swore it wasn't medical. Said they were close. My hands were shaking now. I turned away, hiding the rising panic in my eyes. No. This wasn't happening. Not again. First Ethan, now this stranger telling me there were secrets in the house I lived in. I turned back. Which neighbor said that? He paused. The woman across the street. The older one with the German shepherd. She said she'd tell you herself, but didn't want to stir the pot. Mrs. Dobbins. Of course. She was always on her porch. Always watching. She used to joke that nothing ever got past her eyes. I used to smile at that. Now it felt like ice water in my veins. I ended the meeting early. Told Daniel I'd send over the paperwork by the end of the week. He left politely, but not before giving me one last glance that felt more like pity than respect. And I hated it. Because I didn't want to be pitied. I wanted the truth. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened Greg's old laptop. It had been sitting in a drawer in the bedroom for months. I couldn't bring myself to look at it before. But now? Now I needed to see everything. The screen flickered to life with his old password, Life with Claire. I almost cried right there. But I didn't. I pushed through. Emails. Notes. Drafts of letters. I scanned everything. Until I found one. A message draft he never sent. It was addressed to Ethan. And the subject line read, "If I don't make it." I opened it, and what I read made my entire body go numb. Ethan. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. First off, I'm sorry. I never reached out sooner. I know it's been years since Vermont. Since Mom's funeral. I just didn't know how to bridge the gap after what I said that day. Claire doesn't know about you. Or the lake house. I asked her not to. I wanted something that was just mine. Selfish, I know. But she was always the strong one. She held me together. If something happens to me, tell her the truth, but be kind. I never told her about Lily either. There's too much pain. Too many mistakes. I just wanted to leave peacefully. Tell her I loved her. Even if she won't believe it. I stared at the screen. My fingers trembled over the keys. Lily? Who was Lily? And why the hell did my husband think I couldn't handle the truth? They say the dead can't speak. But sometimes, they leave behind just enough to burn your world to the ground. And suddenly, I realized something chilling. I didn't know my husband. Not really. And whoever Lily was, she held a piece of the puzzle that could break everything. Lily. That name echoed through my head like a haunting. Like a bell that had been ringing quietly for years, and I'd only just now heard it. Greg had secrets. But this? This wasn't a secret. This was a second life. I scrolled through the draft again, looking for any clues. No last name. No mention of who she was. Just Lily. The way he wrote it, as if Ethan would already understand. Which meant she wasn't some abstract idea. She was real. Known. Part of a conversation I had never been included in. And suddenly, all those quiet hours I spent by his side during chemo started to feel different. As if he wasn't fading, he was withholding. Protecting something. Or someone. I had no idea who Lily was, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't let this go. I started with the will. Greg had left me everything: the house, the car, the savings, what little remained of his retirement. There was no mention of Ethan, no mention of Vermont, and definitely no mention of Lily. But there was one odd line I'd skimmed over when the lawyer first read it, because back then I was too shattered to care. One item from the safe to be given to the party designated by Ethan Matthews, in private. That line meant nothing to me then. Now, it was a blaring siren in my chest. There was a safe in the garage, behind a row of toolboxes Greg used to keep obsessively clean. I hadn't opened it since he passed. I didn't know the combination, but I remembered he once wrote it down and taped it inside his toolbox drawer, covered by a rag he never moved. I ran to the garage, heart thudding, ripped open the drawer, and there it was. Faded ink, but clear enough to read. August 14th, 27. His parents' wedding anniversary. I stood in front of the safe, palms sweaty, and punched in the numbers. Click. It opened with a groan. Inside, I expected to find paperwork. Maybe some photos. But what I found instead stopped my breath completely. There was a small pink envelope with a child's handwriting. To Daddy. From Lily. Beneath it, a folded drawing, a stick figure holding hands with a tall man. Big red heart in the middle. A caption scribbled in crayon underneath. Me and Daddy at the lake. Mommy took this. My legs nearly gave out. A child. Lily was his daughter. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. How? When? With who? And why didn't he tell me? I sank to the concrete floor, the envelope clutched to my chest, and I sobbed like I hadn't since the night he died. But this wasn't grief. Not entirely. This was betrayal tangled in confusion. He had a daughter. And I had never even been allowed to know she existed. What kind of man hides an entire child from his wife? And then I remembered something Ethan had shouted during our argument. You isolate them until they forget who they are. Was he talking about me? Or was he talking about Lily's mother? I needed to know more. I called the lawyer. Demanded to know who Ethan had designated for that item in the safe. After some hesitation, and me threatening to sue for full disclosure, the assistant read the name aloud. Lillian Carter. Carter. Not Matthews. Not my last name. Not Greg's. But her name matched the note. Lily. Lillian. She was real. And suddenly, I knew where I had to go next. I went back to Mrs. Dobbin's house. She answered the door like she was expecting me, her sharp eyes, half-lidded, and that same damn German shepherd panting behind her legs. Afternoon, she said, her voice casual like this wasn't life-shattering. Did you ever see a little girl with Greg? I asked, no small talk, no smiles. Mrs. Dobbins tilted her head. You mean Lily? There it was. Confirmation. You knew? I whispered. She sighed. I figured you did too. Well, I didn't. She blinked slowly, sympathy finally reaching her face. I didn't think it was my place to say anything. I only ever saw her a few times. She looked just like him. Same eyes. She'd come with a woman, maybe mid-30s. Dark hair. Pretty. Quiet. They'd come around once every few weeks. Usually stayed about an hour. Then they'd leave. When? I asked, my voice shaking. Before or after the diagnosis? Both. That hit me like a freight train. He had time to introduce her to neighbors. But not to me. Mrs. Dobbins put a hand on my arm. Look, I don't think he was trying to hurt you. He always looked conflicted. Torn. He wasn't careless. He was scared. I nodded numbly. Scared of what? She didn't answer. Because she didn't know. Back at the house, I pulled out every photo album we had. Scanned every image. Every corner. Every frame. And in one, just one, I found it. A woman in the background. Slightly blurred. Holding a child. Watching us during one of Greg's birthday barbecues. I had assumed she was a neighbor. A stranger. Now, I realized, she might have been watching her daughter play in the backyard of the man she loved. From the sidelines. Like a ghost. Like a shadow. Like someone who'd been told, you can visit. But you can't stay. That night, I sat in the dark, Lily's drawing in my lap. Greg was gone. But the truth? It was just getting started. He hadn't left me a goodbye. He'd left me a question mark. And that little girl. Lily, she was the answer I was going to find. Narrator transition. You think you know someone. You love them, nurse them, bury them, and still, there are layers left hidden. My husband didn't just die with secrets. He buried them, hoping I'd never dig. But grief has a funny way of turning pain into purpose. And now? I wasn't letting this go. I didn't sleep again. Not a wink. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, staring at the pink envelope in my hand, the one Lily wrote to Greg. To her dad. While I, his wife, the woman who planned every surgery and wept over every scan, had been kept completely in the dark. 4 months ago, I was folding hospital gowns. Now I was unfolding the truth about the man I thought I'd buried with dignity. And all I wanted, all I needed now, was to hear it from the one person who might actually give me real answers. Lily's mother. The next morning, I called Ethan. I hated doing it. But if anyone knew the full truth, it was him. He picked up after the 3rd ring. You found the drawing, didn't you? He said. No hello. No small talk. I did. A pause. Then, you still want the truth? I want all of it. He let out a long breath. Her name is Meredith Carter. Lives up in Asheville. She never asked for money. Never wanted drama. She just wanted Lily to know her father. Greg promised to keep it quiet. Said it would hurt you too much. I bit back a bitter laugh. So instead, he let me live a lie. Ethan's voice dropped. He didn't do it to punish you. He was scared. And ashamed. He never meant to fall in love with her. It happened years before you even met. That made me freeze. Wait. What? She's not recent. Meredith was Greg's college girlfriend. The one he never talked about. The one he left when things got complicated. My heart was pounding now. How old is Lily? 12. 12. 12 years old, and I'd been married to Greg for 10. The blood drained from my face. That meant Lily was 2 years old when we got married. And he already had a child. A daughter. One he chose not to tell me about. I clenched the phone tighter. Send me her address. Claire. Do it. Asheville was a 3-hour drive. But I barely felt the road. I barely felt anything. My mind kept playing every moment from our wedding day in reverse. The way he looked at me, the way he promised forever. And the way, deep down, I could never explain the flicker of guilt that always lingered behind his eyes. Now I knew why. Meredith Carter opened the door like she'd been expecting me. She was beautiful, in that quiet, unshaken way some women carry pain. Dark brown hair swept up in a loose bun, tired eyes behind soft glasses, and a kindness that stung more than any harsh word ever could. You must be Claire, she said gently. I nodded stiffly. And you're Meredith. She didn't deny it. Just stepped aside and said, come in. Her home was small, but warm. Toys lined the edge of the living room. Photos hung on the wall, not a single one of Greg. But in the center, above the couch, was a crayon drawing just like the one I'd found in the safe. Lily. And her dad. She doesn't know he's gone yet, Meredith said, catching me staring. My heart stopped. What? I haven't told her. I wanted to wait until school was over. Let her enjoy one last normal week. I swallowed hard. She knew him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Meredith smiled sadly. She adored him. They saw each other every month, when you were working night shifts or away with your mother. He came up here. Never missed a visit. My knees felt weak. You let him hide it for 12 years. I didn't let him do anything, Meredith replied firmly. He made his choices. And I respected the boundary, because he promised he was protecting you. Not from Lily, but from the pain of his past. And from the guilt of what you two couldn't have. I froze. What we couldn't have? Meredith looked at me, and in that moment, I knew she knew more than I wanted anyone to know. Greg told me about your miscarriages, she said softly. And about the IVF. The losses. The surgeries. Claire, he wasn't keeping Lily from you to betray you. He was keeping her hidden because he didn't know how to look you in the eye and say, I have a child I didn't even raise, while you've been breaking yourself trying to give me one. My vision blurred. My lips trembled. He knew. He knew how hard I tried. How broken I felt. How I'd sat on that bathroom floor for hours, sobbing after another failed cycle, while he drove 3 hours to see the daughter he never told me about. You knew I wanted children, I whispered. And you still kept her from me. Meredith nodded slowly. He thought if he introduced her, it would destroy everything. He believed he had to choose between his past and his present. And Claire, he chose you. I didn't know what hurt more, that he hid a daughter, or that he never gave me the choice to love her, too. Because I would've. God, I would've. I would've opened my arms to that little girl in a heartbeat, even if she wasn't mine by blood. Because she was his. And that would have been enough for me. Does she know about me? I asked, voice hollow. Meredith hesitated. She knows you were special to him. She used to call you the lady in the picture. He told her you were his best friend. Said you were taking care of him when he got sick. A tear slid down my cheek. She deserved better than this. So did you. Meredith smiled gently. We all just loved the same man in different ways. And none of us really got to keep him. Before I left, she walked me to the door. Then she placed something in my hand. A folded card. Faded, yellowed at the edges. I found this in Greg's coat pocket last winter, she said. He must have written it and never mailed it. I opened it slowly, my heart already bracing. Claire. I lied to you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to lose you. I should have told you everything. About Lily. About Meredith. About the mistakes I made before I met you. You gave me more grace than I ever deserved. And I'll spend the rest of my life, however long that is, trying to make peace with the fact that I hurt you anyway. If you ever find this, I hope you know, you were my home. My peace. My heart. Greg. I cried the entire way home. Not just for the betrayal. But for the love that was real, buried beneath so many broken choices. Narrator transition. People think betrayal always looks like cheating, or lies, or screaming fights. But sometimes, it looks like silence. Sometimes, it's a man who loves 2 people and ends up hurting both. Greg died with 2 women holding pieces of his soul, and 1 little girl left holding all the questions. But I wasn't done yet. Because now, it was my turn to choose. And I was about to do something Greg never had the courage to do. Tell Lily the truth. I didn't know how to start. What do you say to a child who should have been part of your life, but never was? What do you tell a little girl who smiled in drawings with your husband, while you were lighting candles beside his hospital bed. The truth? Or the version that hurts less? I stood outside Meredith's house 2 days later, heart hammering so loudly in my chest I thought it might stop altogether. She opened the door and gave me a soft, knowing nod. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside so I could come in. Lily was sitting on the living room carpet, legs crossed, painting on a canvas with watercolors. Her long brown hair was tied in 2 loose braids, and when she looked up, her face was unmistakably his. The same eyes. The same crooked half-smile. My knees went weak. I sat slowly on the edge of the couch, watching her in silence. "Hi," she said after a moment, tilting her head. "Hi," I whispered back. My name is Claire." She looked up at her mom. Meredith nodded gently. Lily blinked. "Are you Daddy's friend?" My throat tightened. I forced a smile. "Yeah. I was your dad's friend for a long time. A very long time." She nodded like she already knew that. "He showed me pictures. You were the one who made him laugh when he got tired." My breath caught. "He told me you had a beautiful laugh," she added softly. I chuckled weakly, tears brimming. "That's funny. I used to say the same about him." She smiled. Then, with the kind of quiet courage that only a child can carry, she asked, "Where is he now?" I glanced at Meredith. She nodded. This was the moment. I turned back to Lily. "Honey," I said gently, "your dad got very, very sick. And even though he fought hard, his body just couldn't keep going." Her lip quivered. I reached for her hand. "He didn't want you to be sad. He loved you so much, Lily. Every second. Every visit. Every drawing." Tears filled her eyes. She looked at her mom, confused. "But he said he'd come next weekend." Meredith kneeled beside her. "I know, baby. He wanted to. He really did." Lily turned to me again. Did he say goodbye?" I nodded, tears falling freely now. "He left something for you. Something very special." I reached into my bag and pulled out the pink envelope. The one from the safe. The one he never got to give her himself. Her small hands trembled as she took it. And for the next few minutes, we just sat together, 2 people mourning the same man in completely different ways. Later, when Meredith walked Lily to her room for a nap, I stayed behind. I stood, staring at the watercolor painting Lily had left behind. It was a house. Not mine. Not Meredith's. But a cabin, by a lake. I stepped closer and realized, it was the lake house. The one Greg had written about. The one from Vermont. In the sky above it, a bright yellow sun had smiling faces inside. 3, not 2. One was clearly Greg. One was Lily. And one, with glasses and curly hair, was me. I gasped softly. Meredith returned, and I showed it to her. She nodded. She said she had dreams where all 3 of you lived there together. Said you always baked cookies. I laughed through my tears. "I don't even bake." She said you did in her dreams. That night, as I drove home, something in me shifted. For weeks, I'd felt angry. Betrayed. Like I'd been replaced. But now, I saw it differently. Greg didn't live 2 lives because he wanted to lie. He lived 2 lives because he didn't know how to make them one. And in trying to protect everyone, he ended up hurting the people who loved him most. I sold the house. Daniel moved in, and we never spoke again. I moved to a small rental just outside Asheville, close enough to drop in on Lily now and then, or pick her up from school when Meredith needed help. We weren't a traditional family. But we were something. And Lily? Lily started calling me Miss Claire. Then just Claire. And once, just once, When she was half asleep in the back seat, she mumbled, "Night-night, Mom." My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. But I didn't correct her. I just whispered, "Good night, sweetheart. You don't get to choose the truth. You can bury it. You can outrun it. You can build entire lives around pretending it never existed. But eventually, it finds you. And when it does, you have a choice. Let it break you. Or let it remake you." Greg didn't give me honesty. But he gave me something else. He gave me Lily. And somehow, in the ashes of everything I thought I knew, that was enough to begin again.